If you think it's time for a change in your community, but more importantly, you want to be the change, an online Master in Public Administration degree from Claremont Lincoln University could be the start. The CLU MPA program has an advisory council of frontline leaders, mayors, school board members, city council members, a state senator, and even a state treasurer, all looking for the next generation of changemakers. In other words, who's next? The real world is calling. A CLU MPA is part of the answer. Find out more at claremontlincoln.edu/MPA. Welcome back, everybody. This is the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business, interviewing the brightest and most influential minds across higher education and beyond. Oh boy, am I excited today. This is Dr. Joe Solucio here with another special EdUp Embedded episode where I go one-on-one with a lucky guest. It's the next contestant here on the EdUp Experience. I'm going to introduce him in a second, but I'm going to tell you what he is bringing to the table is extremely interesting, and it's a first for the EdUp Experience to talk to him about his company and what they have going on. But before I bring him in, I want to remind everybody, if you do support the EdUp Experience, please, I'm begging and pleading, I do that quite often, to head to Apple Podcasts and give us a rating or review. It helps the podcast get found. And make sure Liz and I, my co-host, and Elvin, a producer here, do all of this work for nothing, and somebody actually tells us that they listen to this thing. I mean, come on, guys, give me 5 minutes of your time. I would greatly appreciate it, as would Elvin and Liz. And today, right now, I'm bringing in an amazing gentleman. His name is Dillon Twombly. I hope I got that right. He's Chief Revenue Officer at VIA. Dillon, how are you doing today?
Great, Joe. Thanks. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to have you talk about VIA. But before I get to that, there is one burning question that our audience has. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
If you could only play one song every single time you walked into a room, your entrance music, if you would, what song would be playing for you?
This is a bad answer, but I'm gonna say I would do Sinatra in My Way.
Ooh, that's good. Well done, sir. I like that. It's confident. It's kind of says who you are. I dig that. Thank you very much. You have to imagine that when we ask that question to warm up our guest and our audience, we get a range of answers. Country music. That's the first time anybody's brought out Sinatra, and I very much appreciate that. Well done.
Thanks.
Well, tell me about VIA. What do you guys do at VIA, and how do you do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our goal really is to enable public mobility. We're doing this by providing technology to sort of a broad range of partners, as we call them, including universities. So we work with universities, cities, transit agencies, and private companies to provide the technology that allows them to operate efficient, equitable, and accessible transportation services.
Okay, so give me that in layman's terms now.
Yeah, so we're providing a technology infrastructure or backbone. In most cases, it's an app that allow, in this case, universities to craft a service for staff, faculty, and students that meets whatever needs they have. So it might be a night or weekend service. It might be a safe ride service. It might be a service for riders with disabilities. And we can do that all using technology.
Okay, so how does this, it's a transportation app. Tell me, how does this relate to other car services like Uber and Lyft, and how's your market positioning, and who you're competing against, or are you guys unique in your area?
Yeah, I think we're pretty unique in what we're doing. I think the differentiation between other options like other rideshare or operating sort of a traditional fixed route service that a lot of universities have is this is their service. So we're coming in and white labeling an app that universities like Northwestern, Columbia, and Harvard will tailor to meet their needs. So they're dealing with the branding. We're helping enable them to think through branding, naming the service, and then the service parameters. We work very closely with them to understand, like, what are your challenges? Are you worried about providing safe transportation at night for students to certain locations? Are you worried about providing better access across campus and through student housing? And by giving them that control, we can really make sure they're accomplishing these needs. And I think one of the other differences is we're giving them the data. And so this is their service. They're going to see what types of trips students are taking, when they're riding, and this allows them to continue to improve that network and keep students sort of within that campus safety bubble.
Okay, so if the student's getting rides to the bar all the time, you're gonna be able to see that, and a student headed to the library, you're gonna be able to see that. Of course, I may have taken a few trips to the bar along my way in the college experience, but we don't need to get into that, Dillon. Not that you're asking, but that's neither here nor there. But okay, so let me understand this. So you're white labeling a service that the university offers. So basically, it's their transportation service that you're basically white labeling, and the student is taking transportation within the university offering. So then I can measure where they're going, how long if they're using the transportation service or not. So I may have a student that is maybe thinking about leaving college because they feel like they can't get around, or they have a car accident or something and have expenses, and now they can become exposed to a transportation service through the university, so it could help with retention. If I'm going to a university, I can be sold as a student on the safety that if I have my own university transportation service that is safer than just going any old place. It's monitored, it's safer, it's more accessible. Are all of those, am I right on with the way I'm imagining this to be?
Yeah, that's right, Joe. And I think what we're doing is really enabling sort of the next generation of campus transportation. Most educational institutions provide some kind of transportation for students, and it typically is kind of a circulating bus that'll stop at fixed stops. And as you get into some of the later hours, sometimes the frequency isn't great and the locations aren't great. And so, working with schools to understand things like, as you pointed out, sort of secure, safe ride at night, or kind of off-peak transportation services. Yes, in some cases, we're providing transportation home from extracurricular activities, but the key point is really allowing students to get home safely, and the university to be able to exert more control over that.
How does this one of the big, as you probably know, not telling you anything you don't know, is a big concern around climate and environmental sustainability, and the carbon footprint of colleges and universities across the United States, and what their stance is on getting to zero net energy and all that kind of stuff. How does working with VIA help with that sustainability goals, or those sustainability goals?
Yeah, great question. We view the single occupancy vehicle sort of like we want people to view the single occupancy vehicle like now like people view smoking, right? And so by providing this technology, we are typically doing shared rides, and so we're enabling students going in a similar direction to get partnered up or paired up in a vehicle. Now during COVID, obviously, we flexed this to follow local, both campus and local municipal safety and health regulations. So in some cases, we've gone to either smaller numbers of people in larger vehicles or single occupancy. But in general, we're putting multiple people in these vehicles and cutting down on what would be otherwise either a single vehicle, single passenger trip, or cutting down on the inefficiency of having a large bus drive around empty, which is both very inefficient. It's not environmentally friendly, and it provides a really bad quality of service for the rider who's having to wait 45 minutes for a bus that may or may not come.
Right. Inefficiency, horrible inefficiency in some ways when you have just a bunch of vehicles driving around with nobody in them. That's why here in California, where I live, you're going to get a big ticket if you're on the if you're in the express lane and you don't have anybody else in your car. By the way, if I don't know if they do this you guys are in New York, right? Are you guys in New York?
We're headquartered in New York. That's right.
Yeah. So here in LA, in some of the freeways, you'll hear stories and you'll see people pulled over with a blow up person in their passenger seat so that they can get on the expressway lane, which I never had seen that anywhere before, but here in California, I happen to see it all the time. Or they put like some kind of stuffed animal in the front seat that's big enough, and they put like a person's mask on the face. So I've never seen anything like that before, but that is literally inefficient. The way that those things happen is people try to take advantage of those things instead of just grouping up and riding together. But we're at a time now where riding together comes with more risk than it has before, especially with COVID. So in a ride share type of model, you have to balance the efficiency of ride share against the safety concerns. What have you guys done from a safety and perspective, as COVID evolves and continues to evolve without, hurting the business model, as it were?
Yeah, and in all cases, all of our services globally, we're working in almost 40 countries with about 500 partners now. And in all cases, we've worked, I think, with something like 60 different health authorities or agencies to modify the service to make sure we were providing a safe experience that was in line with local, kind of health and safety codes. In a lot of cases, the university is operating this service, so we're providing technology or, in some cases, operations as well. But again, this is the university service. And so we work with them to either reduce capacity in the vehicles, in some cases, make it single occupancy. And by having technology that's doing this, it's a lot more efficient. We can make these changes almost on the fly. We can work through messaging to riders through the app, in addition to other methods on campus. And so I think we've seen a lot of, particularly schools that have technology-enabled transportation during COVID and other disruptions. The technology has allowed them to be much more flexible and much more responsive, both as COVID sort of pushed down demand and students went off campus, but then as students have come back to campus, and now with the Delta surge, as universities and educational institutions are dealing with sort of how do they manage this kind of in-between time here.
If you walk by a homeless person and say, somebody should do something, you're right. If you say, I should do something, we should talk. We're Claremont Lincoln University, and we're offering a dynamic new online Master in Public Administration program that is designed to empower the next generation of changemakers, people like you. CLU is online by design, with faculty that are scholar practitioners who are on the front lines. This isn't theory, this is reality. So if you're ready for a new MPA program that makes everything else seem old school, go to claremontlincoln.edu today, because it's time for a change. Find out more at claremontlincoln.edu/MPA.
One of the most fascinating parts for me, and as I think about this, I went to a state university in New York, actually, called Oneonta, as part of the SUNY system. Sure. And it was a pretty decent sized campus, but I remember walking around at night and not ever having a worry. Maybe that was because of the days that we lived in back then, long before there was big time crime and shootings and all these crazy things that have happened on campuses that make them the necessity of having a safe campus so much more important now for students. You guys have you ran a case study at Northwestern where you relaunched your Safe Ride program. And one of the big questions I have is, how in demand is late night rides, or are late night rides? It seems like on big campuses, especially now, as safety becomes such an important part of going to college now, and it wasn't ever asked before. We've had so many guests on where it's like, it used to go away from what program does the university offer to what program does the university offer, and what's the safety report look like, and how safe is it, and how many blue lights are on campus, and all these kind of things. So talk to me about the night riding part of VIA and why that's so important to college campus safety.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think it sort of underlines the importance of transportation on campus and why safety is so important. At the end of the day, students keep odd hours. They're up all the time, whether it's studying for exams, coming back from a late shift, going to an early practice. The campuses are really this 24-hour community. And I think with the increase in, frankly, technology in consumer rideshare services, the expectations of both students and parents have really been risen. And I think a lot of universities are stepping up and providing both safer alternatives like night ride service, but also the transparency to the student, so they know where the vehicle is, they know when it's coming, they know what stops they're going to make on the way back. They can tell people, hey, I'll be back in this amount of time. I think some of the legacy services that we've seen both with public transit agencies, but also universities, where you're having to call in or pre-schedule a ride. They're giving you a wide pickup window, and waiting outside sort of even the central library on campus at 1 a.m, by yourself can be an unsettling experience. And so really, I think universities in general are kind of doubling down to make sure they can provide that safe transit at all hours and kind of increase that social contract with students.
Talk to me about data. How important is data to your operation as you talk with colleges and universities? You find a potential partner. What kind of data do people want to see, and what are you tracking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's not only the data, but it's what that data enables. And so as we look at things like what types of trips are students taking, in a lot of these cases, these services are built around a late night trip home from a library or other sort of student center. And we can work with the university to craft what trip types they will allow, or what trip types they're trying to facilitate. And so we can see the types of rides they're taking, the length of rides, how many rides students are taking, how many students are availing themselves of these services. I think one of the big challenges traditionally with safe ride services has been getting the word out across campus, making sure everyone knows about them. And so, technology really allows schools to be able to do that. And you've got that app. All the students are using the app, so we can really look at all this ridership data, and then schools can take this data to adjust their service. Right? Maybe we're getting requests right outside the service zone, and so we can look at expanding the zone of service that they're providing, or we can suggest additional destinations based on the trip types that students are taking.
You guys how does it work? You come in like a fleet of cars, or is it like a contract kind of service where you have a bunch of people who are contractors that are part of the organization or contract with the university? How does that work if someone who's going to be part of that process?
Yeah, we do both models. So in all cases, we're providing the technology. We're providing this app and the algorithm that routes these vehicles. And then we'll work with the university to understand, do they have vehicles? Do they have drivers? Do they have sort of a legacy safe ride or dial ride program where we can leverage those vehicles? Or would they rather have us come in and operate that service on their behalf? In all cases, it's their service that we're enabling, but we have a very flexible model to sort of take advantage of the resources that universities already have in place.
Talk about the scope of your organization a little bit. How many, you said you have about 500 partners or so. Where are you? Are you global? Are you domestic? And are you in major cities, smaller cities? And what's the expansion look like and evolution of the company?
Yeah, we are in almost 40 countries, heavy concentration in North America and Europe, but we're truly a global company. We have partners in Japan, and we're launching a university service now in Australia, throughout the Middle East, Latin America. And so we're truly global. And those 500 partners compose a wide range of cities, transit agencies, universities, and private companies where we help enable sort of more efficient corporate transportation. And we're doing this in rural, suburban, urban locations. Really, the technology is incredibly flexible to enable this type of transportation, regardless of what the environment is.
Any interest in flying me around to all 40 countries to interview you 40 times? And just out of curiosity.
I can definitely look at it. Having done about half of those before COVID, I would say it's really great to sort of get on there's no substitute for getting on the ground and understanding sort of the challenges that these partners face.
Give me like what is the smallest country you could think of that you guys are in right now out of those 40 countries?
Malta.
Nice. Still, well, I'll go anytime you let me know. I'll come with you, Dillon. We'll go check it out together. Let's maybe do some podcasting from there too. Who knows? So what do I need to do? Like I'm thinking about this now. You've convinced me via, it could be something I want to look at for my campus. Who do I reach out to? Who do I contact? How do I go about this if I'm interested in thinking about VIA for my campus?
Yeah, I mean, reach out to us. Our website is ridewithvia.com. I'm happy to talk to partners always. And I think the key piece of this is understanding what the challenges that the university has, right? What are they trying to enable? What's worked in the past and what hasn't? And then we'll work through these processes with them to scope out what a service would look like. Do they need vehicles? Do they have vehicles already? Is this a safe ride service, or are they looking to provide a supplemental service to the current fixed route network that they're also operating? I would say one of the other problems that we didn't touch on that is, front and center for all campuses is parking, right? And so the other piece of this
Always and
is,
forever, parking is a problem. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like the most inefficient use of land, and sort of creates ongoing problems for both students and faculty. And having a more dynamic transportation network really alleviates the need for students to have their own transportation there. They can rely on this network that the university's built and hopefully has integrated with the community in which they are located.
I find this to be really interesting. Let me ask this question before I get to our final kind of two questions. When you go to a potential university partner and you're talking to them about transportation, let's assume it's a university that's got a sizable footprint. Is there, like, yeah, we need this. This is awesome. I can't believe this exists. Or is it, oh no, we don't ever have these problems? Or, what's the recognition that something like VIA helps in these areas with because I would imagine, especially on larger campuses, that rides and finding rides and safe rides is a major issue that universities are attempting to solve and iterate through to make their campus more safe, more accessible, easier to navigate. We do know in higher education that students have trouble navigating a campus or traveling within a campus infrastructure. It's one of the reasons they disappear. It's one of the reasons they drop or cancel or whatever else. So what's the recognition that this is something that a school might need? You have to really explain it, or is there a clear, crystallized recognition that this is something that could help me?
I think, like parking, school administrators and particularly sort of transportation managers at mid to large size universities are very aware. They're acutely aware of this challenge, and the number of conversations and sort of the demand from universities over the past year has really skyrocketed. I think, much like transportation, universities are trying to navigate how do they come back, how do they sort of strike this balance between either online or remote and in person, and transportation is a key piece of this. I think the other piece is as you pointed out earlier, there's this renewed focus on safety. Not that universities ever didn't take student safety very seriously, but I look at like Columbia
They
University.
used to be safer campuses. They used to be way safer 20 years ago than they are now.
Well, it's just a different set of challenges too, right? And we look at
Totally.
schools like Columbia, where our Safe Ride program with them is a piece of their broader safety program, right? They've got safety escorts, intercampus shuttle, they've got blue light emergency call boxes. This is a piece of your safety kind of program for students.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about. And to be honest, before you came here and before I did my research on you guys, I didn't even think about that, right? Because I've always worked in online institutions or smaller institutions. I've never worked for a large public or a large private institution where they had transportation is like a major issue or even as a service. So, there's a part of higher education doesn't even think about these things, which is really amazing because it's another example of companies and technology in and around higher education that help make our world easier and better. And you're at the front end, Dillon, and you guys are doing great work, and we very much appreciate talking with you. I'm going to give you my final two questions that I ask every single guest. Number one, what did we miss about VIA? What do you want to say? Anything that you planned on saying today that I forgot to ask you about? Anything at all? Your let's call it your plug section. And secondly, given all the experience you have and all the conversations you're having in higher ed, what does the future of higher education look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll take the first question first. I think one of the other things that I would emphasize here is kind of like you raised, good transportation for universities is analogous to sort of transportation in cities. It's the number one piece of economic empowerment for cities. If people can get great jobs, but they can't get reliable transportation there, sort of that whole system falls apart. And it's the same on campus. And so if we can remove friction from transportation, from the student experience, they're really able to focus on other things. And you need to do this in an equitable and accessible way. And so one of our really hallmarks of what we're doing is providing, we always say, accessible and equitable transportation. So you're providing it to all types of student riders, whether it's students with disabilities, students who live on different parts of campus, really making sure that we're providing something holistic for everyone to access. You want as many riders as you can. And so I would say that in terms of the future of education, I think it's an exciting time to be sort of at this crossroads between education and transportation, because they're both really looking to understand how they operate in this, I won't say post-COVID, but maybe inter-COVID period where there's going to be some hybrid experience for both students and faculty. And I think looking at that holistic experience of the student, it's not just about are they online and what is that online experience? It's how do you replicate some of that social experience, which I think, for all of us was a good portion of your learning in university, right? Is how are you learning from your peers and getting some of that social interaction that's so important for students really of all ages. So I think it's an interesting time, and we've really enjoyed working through helping universities solve some of these challenges.
That's a really good point, and it's important to kind of pick that out, especially as we look at hybrid learning, part-time on campus. Maybe I can do some online classes. Maybe I'm taking one class, it's a synchronous class, and I'm at home doing it because I didn't get out of bed in time, and then I got to get ready and get into the campus for my class that is offered on ground. I need to be able to have the flexibility to come in and go out on demand, right? And do it in a way that's safe and accessible and quick. And that is going to be really interesting to see how VIA is at the front end of that, Dillon. And I would welcome you back, 6 months from now to see, as hopefully COVID dies down to some degree, what that looks like for VIA, and to talk to our higher education audience again. I really am honored to have you on the show with Dillon Twombly, Chief Revenue Officer at VIA. Dillon, it's been an honor to have you.
Thanks, Joe. It's been great. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
If you say someone should do something about climate change, you're right. If you say I should do something about climate change, we should talk. We're Claremont Lincoln University, and we've created a dynamic new online Master in Public Administration program in partnership with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. This is an MPA designed to give future changemakers the tools needed to take on the issues in today's world. And because there's no time like the present to support our future leaders, the Lincoln Institute is giving $100,000 in fellowships. You could get a $10,000 fellowship towards your MPA. Apply now